It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC,
Batman, Wonder Woman,
Marvel,
Spider-Man,
Image,
Spawn, Saga,
Boom,
Once and Future, Power Rangers,
or whatever book or publisher you follow,
we cover them all here.
this is the place for you.
That's right, it's for everyone.
This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
Let's get it.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo, and we got another episode of comic book reviews as we look back at the list of books that have released this past week. There's not much from the news standpoint. The only real news is that DC has released their solicitations for the month of September. So that is up on the website over at thecomicbookspot.com. So head on over there and take a look. Other than that, I am recording this for Sunday release. And with that being said, I want to wish all of the fathers, all of my fellow fathers out there, a happy Father's Day. I hope that you enjoy the day made just for you. But with that, we got about 10 titles that we are going to look at this week. One being the final issue of Little Black Book from AWA from Jeff McComsey and Felipe Cunha. A new series over at Image Comics, Rifters #1 from Brian Posen, Joe Droman, and Chris Johnson. Green Lantern #12 from Jeremy Adams and Zermanico. Transformers #9 from Daniel Warren Johnson and Jorge Corona over at Skybound Image. Then we're going to go over to Valiant, who's been trying to make a comeback with the resurgence of the Valiant Universe with the Valiants #2 from Ryan Cady with art by Al Barrienouveau. Then we're going to look at issue #3 of Blood Hunt, the event over at Marvel Comics from Jed McKay and Pepe Larraz. Then Outsiders #8 from Jackson Lanzine, Colin Kelly with art by Robert Carey. Then we're going to move over to Dynamite, and we're going to look at Thundercats #5, written and drawn by Stephen Mooney, based on a plot from Declan Shalvey. Then we're going to move back to Image Comics, and on the Ghost Machine side, we're going to look at Geiger #3, written by Jeff Johns with art by Gary Frank. And we're going to end up with my book of the week this week. And you know, I typically don't do Batman books on this. I leave this for the Batman Universe comic podcast. But considering the events in this title, I just had to do it. My book of the week is Batman and Robin #10, written by Joshua Williamson with art by Simone DeMeo and Nicola Shizmi. I keep saying his name wrong, but that's my book of the week this week. So with that being said, let's start with our reviews. Okay, kicking things off this week is Little Black Book #4, written by Jeff McComsey with art by Felipe Cunha over at AWA. I am really pleased with how the story ended. I remember at one point saying that I didn't like the idea of it being so short. But that's kind of how AWA does their books. They're always between 4 and 6 issues. And I was kind of hoping this would get at least 6, but hey, we got 4. But with the way it ended the only way that it could have, with the way the story turned out. It was revealed at the end of issue 2 that Cole's dad, Johnny Boy, was still alive. And so we got to the end of issue 3 where he has now made a deal with Lil Stevie to kind of help him take care of his problems as he's trying to take over from his now dead father. But, he's looking to help out little Stevie one last time and take care of his problem with the Coulson family. And then in turn over his book of secrets, his little black book. But we get to issue 4, and, there's one of the things that we saw a lot of in the first 3 issues was just a lot of, I'll use the term violence from the standpoint that there was a good bit of blood spilled, whether it was guys getting shot up, whether it was guys getting burned up, some type of violence was occurring. And we didn't get a lot of that at all. As a matter of fact, the most violence that we see doesn't happen until the end of the book. And what we do see is just a lot of conversation, mainly between Johnny and Stevie as they make their way through the desert to meet this Injun, this, as he called them, this Native American who's supposed to help them take care of the Coulson family. But what happens in the end is that there is no Indian out there to help them, that it's just another trap by Johnny to set up Stevie and to take care of that family once and for all. And he does so by pushing little Stevie and his boyfriend off a cliff, killing them both. And but the most touching thing about this is, while this is all happening, Cole and Tess are still trapped in the desert from where Johnny left them at the end of issue 3. And they are talking about Tess's thoughts at the events of issue 1, where she hit the old lady on the highway and Cole came by with the cleanup guy who basically got rid of the body. And Tess being pregnant and the emotions are there, she is thinking about turning herself in despite all that's going on. But Cole decides he doesn't want his wife to deliver their child in jail, and he doesn't want that to happen to his family. So instead, he decides that when everything is over, he's going to go into the city and he's going to turn himself in. That'll allow Tess and the baby to live life free. But what we see in the end, as Johnny makes his way back to Cole and Tess, is that Johnny, despite never being there for Cole for most of his life, makes the ultimate sacrifice for his son. And as Cole makes his way to the sheriff's department to turn himself in, he and Tess finds out that Johnny actually takes the charge. He goes in and he tells the sheriff's department about hitting the woman and the body being disposed of. And he goes to jail willingly to save his son and his son's wife for having to deal with that stigma. Very cleverly done by Jeff McComsey in bringing that story to an end. You knew that at some point the death of the old lady was going to come back around. I didn't know how it was going to be handled, but I am happy with how he handled it and bringing it to a close, with Johnny Boy taking the rap for his daughter-in-law's action, but allowing his son and daughter-in-law to live free and have that brand new house. Well, not brand new, but have that big house for him and his soon-to-be family. But even better than the story was the art and the colors. Absolutely beautiful in all that was done from that standpoint. The artwork from Felipe was really, really good. Really, really enjoyed it. But the colors from Marco Lesko, and I remember he did the colors over at Titan for Robotech, and I loved it there, and I love it here as well. The shades of brown and orange as they're in the deserts, and then being able to switch to an entirely different palette when they bring the scene back into the city, just absolutely superb. It was the strongest of the elements that I usually will rate books on. Absolutely loved it. It was the strongest piece of the issue, but the story overall was really, really good as well from start to finish. Again, when I first picked this up in issue 1, I wasn't sure how I would feel about it. Was pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed issue 1. I stuck with it, and I'm happy I did. Getting through the 4th and final issue as well. Over on the site, I actually wrote up a full review of issue number 4. I gave it 8 out of 10 on our new rating scale. But again, that is Little Black Book number 4, written by Jeff McComsey with art by Felipe Cunha over at AWA. Next up, we go over to Image Comics and a new series, Rifters number 1. Rifters is written by Brian Posehn and Joe Trohman with art by Chris Johnson. I'm not gonna tread on this too long. This was a story that I thought I would enjoy more than I did, but I did not. It's a time travel story. If you've seen Time Cops, the movie, or something of that nature, this is kind of what you get. The difference is it has a lot of slapstick in it, with regards to how some individuals go back in time and make their jokes and do whatever. And I was not a fan of it. It would be okay if it was, a little slapstick here or there, but it was just throughout the issue, and it kind of made it old quick for me. Now, to be fair, I am going to give it another shot just to see what happens in the next issue, especially considering how issue 1 ended. But I am right now thinking that I am not going to finish this series. I understand what they were trying to do with regards to the Time Cop storyline, but the inundation of just bad comedy just made it unenjoyable. But I am going to give it another shot. I'm going to give it another shot on issue 2 when it comes out. The art was really good. The colors were pretty good as well. But the story was very lacking. So I'm not certain if I will stick with it. But I'm going to give it another shot with issue 2, just to see how the story moves along, considering how it ended, with a little drama, as there's a car barreling down on a little boy, and one of the Time Cops are going out of their way to save him. So we will see how that turns out in issue 2. Hopefully it's better than issue 1. But again, that is Rifters number 1, written by Brian Posehn and Joe Trohman, with art by Chris Johnson over at Image Comics. Alright, moving moving on over to DC, we have Green Lantern number 12. Green Lantern number 12, written by Jeremy Adams, with the main story being drawn by Sermonico. This continues the story of the Lanterns of 2814 as they try to escape from the Lanterns of the United Planets and their allies, the Ring Hunters and the Unseen, and all that has been going on. And we see, Hal has this power ring that they don't know where the source is coming from, because remember, the United Planets destroyed all of the power batteries that the Guardians created, and so they're not certain where Hal is getting this power from. And so there's just this big old battle coming on, and as they begin to overtake the Lanterns, because it was pretty much a setup from Theos in getting them all there, but as they pretty much barrel down on Hal, someone comes to his rescue, and it is none other than the Star Sapphire, the last Star Sapphire, and that would be Hal's on again, off again boo, Carol. And so we see that Carol comes, she battles the Unseen, she gets Hal, and she takes off with him in tow. So they now have to report back to Theos that, the Star Sapphire, Carol Ferris, has her ring, and she took Hal. So while this is going on, Carol is kind of opening up to Hal and discussing her feelings, and she pretty much says that she doesn't want to be with anyone else but him. And this isn't Star Sapphire talking to him. This is Carol Ferris talking to Hal Jordan, and she's really expressing herself, and I really enjoyed the conversation between those two. It was Carol doing most of the talking, but just her opening her heart and revealing how she truly feels about Hal once and for all. But while this is going on, Theos is communicating with Amanda Waller, basically saying, hey, I need some of your folks to help some of my folks find Hal, because he has this ring. We don't know where the source of the power is coming from, and I need that information. I need to know where that power source is. And so Amanda, because basically she's operating because Theos is saying the United Planets are letting her do so. And so she sends King Shark to accompany Theos' goons as they go and find Hal, who is at Carol's place, I believe, at the trailer. But they go there, no, actually at Hal's trailer. And they go and they find them there. And that's really how the issue ended. It was a real quick issue. Getting a lot of action between the Earth Lanterns and the United Planet Lanterns and the Unseen. There were really quick battle with Carol as Star Sapphire. Just great story. The dialogue between, or at least I'll say the dialogue from Carol to Hal was really, really good. And we see where Hal was just about to express himself as well, and saying how he loves Carol before King Shark and the rest of Theos' troops make their way and blast their way into the trailer. So that's how the first story ends. Really good story, good dialogue, fast pace, great action. I can't wait for the next issue. But what I have loved more than the main story has been the backup story, which has focused on Guy Gardner. And those who know me know that Guy Gardner is my favorite Lantern, and he continues this thing with the Lobo that he's been searching for, as parts of what's going on in the Green Lantern world bleeds in with what's going on in House of Brainiac, and Guy has been shrunken down. He's been placed on Zarnia, and or at least that last city of Zarnia that Brainiac has stolen before he destroyed the planet. And he's kind of living the life as a delivery guy there. Really funny. I mean, it's pure Guy shtick throughout. I really, 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 really love the voice that Jeremy Adams gives to Guy. He really understands who he is as a character and as a Lantern. But I really enjoyed it as Guy goes and he puts on this Lobo face with the paint, and they just go and break in, to this storage facility to find a way to remove this, almost like this tracker that they have in his back that keeps him from escaping. But they're able to do that, and once he and this fake Lobo are able to get these devices out and they are transported from the city, they find themselves falling. Now, where they're falling to, I have no idea, but considering the look on Guy's face as they materialize fallen, I can only imagine it will be super, super fun to read in the next issue. But again, the art from Kevin Maguire in the backup story, classic Kevin Maguire art, it really fits with what we're looking at. He's drawn Guy for years, and he has a great handle of who the character is and how to draw him, and I just love it. This was a wonderful story. Anything that puts a spotlight on Guy is okay with me, no matter what. But when it's a good story as well, that makes it even better. So this was just a good read, a good issue all around. Can't wait for the next issue to come out. I'm a huge fan of Jeremy Adams, and I want to thank Ian for turning me on to him back when he was writing The Flash. So it made it easy for me to pick up Green Lantern as well once it was announced he was taking over that title. So we shall see what happens in issue number 13 from both standpoints, with Hal and Carol, and then with Guy in the backup story. But again, that is Green Lantern number 12, written by Jeremy Adams, with art by Zamanico and art by Kevin Maguire over at DC Comics. Next up, we go back to Image, this time on the Skybound side, and we go to Transformers number 9, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, with art by Jorge Corona. And I'll also mention the colors by Mike Spicer, who I am a big fan of. But first off, I'm going to leave the stuff with Carly and with Spike alone. There are some interactions with them. I just want to talk about all of the action and the fighting between the Decepticons and the Autobots in this issue. And it doesn't change. It's just all out battle, no nonsense, no holds bar. And I've been saying it from the start, with not just Transformers, but with everything within the Energen universe, that this partnership that Skybound has with Hasbro right now just allows them to go all out and just crush things. I mean, we can go back to the first issue of this series where Bumblebee dies, and very quickly dies. We get continuation of that. This time it's Ratchet who seems to be on his way out because he gets blasted away as well, and Cliffjumper might be joining them. It's just this version of the Decepticons is just no holds bar, go all out, destroy anything that gets in your way. Now we see that they've opened up this portal that connects them from Earth to Megatron. You know who I'm thinking about. But it connects Earth to Cybertron, and this portal actually allows Elita 1 and Astroplane to walk through and join the battle. Now, Astroplane is not really in any type of condition to fight, but Elita convinces Optimus and the rest of the Autobots that it's time to go, that they're outnumbered, the Combaticons are there, Shockwave and Soundwave. It's just a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't look good for the home team being the Autobots. And so she convinces Optimus and the rest of the team to fall back and regroup. But that leaves, again, the injured Ratchet, and it leaves Cliffjumper behind. And Shockwave is excited about this because this is going to allow him to experiment and do some experiment to see how the effects of being on Earth has affected the Cybertronians. But it's just the way Daniel Warren Johnson has done this series from the get-go has just been amazing. And I can never imagine some of our favorite characters biting the bullet. Now we know Starscream has been taken off of the board, at least for now. Megatron is off the board, at least for now. However, if you're reading the other series in the Eisner Universe, particularly the Cobra Commander series that just ended, you know that Megatron is about to make his way back onto the playing board. And I would assume that he is going to be looking for some revenge first. Maybe on Starscream himself, considering what happened between them before Megatron made his way to Earth. But there's just so much going on in this series that you blink your eye and you miss it. We now know, that Beachcomber has saved Spike. He was about to be delivered to Soundwave. So there's just so much going on, and I absolutely love the nonstop action that's in this series. And what's also good is that despite the action, you get enough dialogue to move the story along as well. Now, I have not been a huge fan of Jorge Corona, and folks who follow on the Batman Universe comic podcast knows that that was particularly the case when he was doing Batgirls. But his art style is similar enough to Daniel Warren Johnson's art style that you don't miss a blip with following the story now that Johnson is strictly doing the writing. In my opinion, that actually allows Johnson to flourish even more as a writer, because again, the story has not lost its pace. The action continues to pick up. I mentioned earlier about just how ruthless these Decepticons are. It's just a great story. And again, I mentioned Mike Spicer. I am a huge fan of his. There's just doesn't seem to be anything that he can't do a great job on. Everything he touches just seems to be gold from a color aspect. And, you may sometimes hear me say, whether you're following on the TBU Discord server or anywhere else, I'll say, give Dan Moore all the covers, or give Jamal Campbell all the covers. You can give Mike Spicer all the colors. Him and Tamer Moore are two of my favorite in the industry right now. And he just does great artwork, or color work here. So I am loving what's going on in this series. Again, it's just rootless battle, rootless fighting, and just no holds barred, go all out, destroy the world, save the world battle between the Autobots and the Decepticons. And at some point, these other characters of the Energon universe are going to make their way to where there really is going to be a battle. And I am here for it. I don't know when Robert Kirkman and the rest of the gang are planning on doing this, but when it happens, I will be there for it. But again, this here is Transformers number 9, written by Daniel Warren Johnson, with art by Jorge Corona, over at Skybound Image. So, since the beginning of this year, Valiant has slowly been trying to make a comeback. At one point in time, it got really bad for the publisher. I mean, at one point, you look at the solicitations and it was one title, and for the most part, it was reprinting of past issues, mainly in a trade format. But eventually you slowly started seeing new series or mini-series come out. There was an Exo-Man Award series that Becky Cloonan and Michael Conrad wrote that came out. We saw a Punk Mambo one-shot, slowly but surely. And eventually they put out this checklist of all of the things that they're looking at doing. And they're doing it under this imprint of prelude to the resurgence of the Valiant Universe. And the main story that I am going to cover within all of this is the series The Valiants, written by Ryan Cady. The art in this is by Al Barrionuevo. We're on issue 2 now. Issue 1 began with this incident in DC where this memorial to Exo-Man of War and was basically swallowed up. Now, this memorial was built because Derek saved the planet from this asteroid that was basically coming to destroy it, but he is now presumed dead. At one point, the Eternal Warrior was presumed dead, or at least missing. Ninjak or Ninja K, depending upon how you call him, was presumed dead. And so this event happens in DC, and it really requires Jamie Capshaw, who's still running things at Gate, to try to find a way to get in front of this incident. And she figures that Ninjak is still alive. So she finds him, and eventually at the end of issue 1, Eternal Warrior shows up as well, and he's there with Tama. Tama is the new geomancer for the planet. But as all of that occurs and the issue ends in issue 1, Deathmate, and if you're familiar with the universe, you know that Deathmate was the previous geomancer who was killed and resurrected, and the resurrection didn't go as planned, however, and that's how Deathmate came to be. But she returns and she kidnaps Tama, and that's how issue 1 ends. So we get to issue 2, and they are now dealing with 2 situations. There's still this hole in Washington, D.C. that they need to get a handle as far as what's going on. But now we also know that Tama has been taken by Deathmate, and they figured that Deathmate wants her job back. She wants to be the geomancer for Earth again. And in order to do that, she needs to take her power back from Tama by killing her. And so Deathmate is infused. When she was resurrected with nanites. And there's only one person that they could see taking her on at this point in time. And that's Bloodshot. Bloodshot, powerful warrior who's also infused with nanites. And so they recruit him. They know where he is. He was considered missing in action as well, but Jamie Capshaw knew where he was. She has him sent for, and they give him this bullet that can basically take down Deathmate. It can't kill him. This bullet was really meant to take him down if he ever crossed gate, but it could also take Deathmate down as well. And he presumed that while it may not be able to kill him, it could definitely kill her. But he uses this bullet to take out Deathmate and save Tama. And while this is going on, they climb down into this hole that's in the middle of Washington, D.C., and they're trying to learn more of it. But there's a lot of action back and forth as you go between this really quick battle between Bloodshot and Deathmate. And in the end, again, Deathmate uses this bullet to what he assumed kills Deathmate, but when you get to the end of the issue, you realize that no, she's actually is alive, and she's being held by someone else who has some plans for her. We don't know what that is yet, but it was a really good story. I am not as familiar with the Valiant Universe as I used to be, so I am sure that I am missing a lot of stuff in between the pages of what's been going on in that universe. But this story was really good. It is slowly bringing back the characters that we have known, the main characters of the Valiant Universe. So issue 1 brought back Ninja K or Ninjak and Eternal Warrior. This issue brought back Bloodshot. I am assuming Livewire will probably be next, as far as bringing back all of the members of Unity from the old Valiant Universe. The only one that seems to be missing by the time it's all said and done is going to be Eisner Award, who is presumed dead. But it's the comic universe, and despite Valiant at one time saying, when you're dead, you're dead, it might not be the case now. So, good story. The art was really good. Nothing really to complain about with this. Again, my biggest issue is not being as familiar with the Valiant Universe as I used to be. So I may have to go back and do a whole lot of rereading. But I will be on the lookout for this. What actually made me pick this up is I was a big fan of Livewire from the old universe. So seeing that they were bringing her back, she's already had her one shot a few months ago, but eventually she'll be back in action as well within this story. I'm going to be following along. But again, that is the Valiants #2, written by Ryan Cady with art by Al Barrionuevo over at Valiant and Alien Books.
Hey, you got a second? The Comic Book Spot is looking for comic book fans with something to say. If you're interested in writing reviews of your favorite comic books, or you want to contribute original content with articles like The Top 10 Forgotten Spider-Man Villains, or Why One More Day Was the Worst Thing to Ever Happen in Comics, or maybe why indie comics saved the comic book industry, then we want to invite you to join our family as a writer. Just reach out and email us at writers@thecomicbookspot.com and let us know that you want to become one of our writers. It's that easy, and honestly, there's no reason not to. You get exclusive access to our staff Discord server, you get early access to comics, and you meet a lot of cool people. What are you waiting for? Just email us at writers@thecomicbookspot.com and let us know that you want to become one of our writers.
So next up, we get into our home stretch with our last 5 books. Next up, we have Blood Hunt number 3, written by Jed MacKay with art by Pepe Larraz. Of the 3 Blood Hunt titles I read this week, the other 2 being Amazing Spider-Man and Strange Academy, this was the best of the 3. And so we know at this point that Blade has turned Miles into a vampire, and he's kind of gone berserk within the Sanctum Sanctorum, going after all of the folks that are there, including Hunter's Moon and Tigra and the Avengers that have joined as well. Well, they're able to restrain Miles, and at that point, after they restrain him, Doctor Strange is able to quell the demon inside of him. He's not able to turn him back human. He's still a vampire, but he has his conscience now. He knows what's going on, and he reveals that Blade has sent him to get his daughter. And of course, you know, his daughter is Blood Hunt, aka Brielle Brooks. And at this point, they reveal to Brielle that Blade is behind all of this, you know, casting out and darkening the planet so that the sun can't get through, and releasing all of the vampires. Her dad is basically public enemy number 1. And Brielle it doesn't sit well with her. She doesn't believe it at first, but it eventually, again, because Miles is the one that tells her he turned him to find her, she accepts it, but she doesn't, and she takes off. They tell her that she's the key to taking Blade down, and she does not want that responsibility, and she takes off. And, you know, Miles considers himself a real good friend of hers. He takes off after her. So does Dracula, because, again, Dracula feels that she's the key to ending the Blade problem with regards to everything that is going on. But once all is done, the rest of the team splits up for their own particular missions as well. Tiger and Hunter's Moon, they go off some spot with someone else in tow. The Avengers are left. They're doing their thing. But at this point, the Avengers say, hey, we need the rest of the world to know that we're on the job. We're fighting. And the only person that rightfully can do this is Captain America. And Sam is hesitant. You know, he's been Cap, but, you know, for him, that's still Steve Rogers. And so he hesitantly does this speech that's just a call to arms everywhere. And it really is a moving speech that he actually put together with T'Challa at one point in time. And it does what they really wanted it to do, not only to rile the forces, but also to rile up Blade and to get him off course. And it does exactly that, because by the end of the issue, Blade has changed course. He's getting everything together to now go after the Avengers. What he was looking to do with regards to getting T'Challa to transport this monument thing from the old city of Atlantis underwater, he has him change course with it. And he tells him that we're going to drop this thing on New York, since your old buddies, the Avengers, want to call me out, more or less. This is my response. And so that's how the issue ended, with him dropping this temple, the temple of the first blasphemy, on top of New York City. And so we will see how things go with issue 4. There were some things that were left unanswered in this issue, probably purposely, because I'm assuming it's going to be picked up elsewhere. Because remember in Doctor Strange, the last issue of Doctor Strange, we know that Stephen's brother is there, and he's looking to take possession of Stephen's body, which is right now is in this suspended state because it's possessed as a vampire. That hasn't been answered yet, so I'm assuming that's going to be answered in the next issue of Doctor Strange, especially now that everyone has left and it's just the body there. So we will see how that works out. The art from Pepe Larraz continues to be good. Always been a fan of his. This one panel, this one page, I won't say a panel, this one page of Sam beginning his speech, beginning his broadcast as Captain America is just beautiful. I could see this as a poster on someone's wall with how good it looks. But just a great story. Blood Hunt continues to be good. I was not pleased with how it began. It just seemed so obvious. And I still feel that some of the tie-in stuff we could probably do without. Looking at you, Blood Hunters. But the main story continues to be good, with this battle that they are now looking to take directly at Blade, knowing that he is the main culprit. So we will see how that goes. Again, that is Blood Hunt number 3, written by Jed MacKay, with art by Pepe Larraz, over at Marvel Comics. We then go back to DC Comics and Outsiders number 8, written by Jackson Lansing, Colin Kelly, with art by Robert Carey. This was a really good story involving Kate Kane and Jenny Hex. Kate is on a mission to basically save someone who is in need of help. Jenny is like, what are you doing in this town? This town is possessed, it's cursed, and now you're a part of it. I'm cursed to handle this problem because I've picked up this gun, and the gun she has is the gun of Jonah Hex. And because of this, I am constantly here shooting ghosts and monsters that continue to come at me. And through the issue, there's a lot of dialogue just speaking about life in many ways. And we get an appearance from Jonah Hex. And he talks about how he too became trapped by picking up this gun, and how it basically made his life once he got handled of it. But what we see at the end is that Jenny is the one that Kate was told was in need of help. And Kate does this by taking possession of the gun. So that means the curse of the holder passes to her now. And so as she goes and she does this thing of, shooting these ghosts and demons that come after her because she's in possession of this gun, she leaves a message for the rest of the outsiders, particularly to Luke, letting him know what's going on and where she is. And so we will see how that picks up with the next issue. If there's one thing that I have not liked about this series, it has always been the name. This has been anything but an Outsiders series from what we have known the Outsiders to be. But the story has always been good. And I'm excited to see where it goes. It's not within the realm of the Batman universe, even though we have two characters from the universe in there. It's been everything of a planetary story and nothing of a Batman story. But it's still been good. The art is really good, especially in this issue from Robert Kelly. And I am looking forward to seeing what happens next as Kate is now being chased down by these ghosts and demons that she needs to tackle with regards to her having possession of the revolver with, limited bullets. But again, good story. Definitely recommended. That is Outsiders number 8 from Jackson Lanzing, Colin Kelly, with art from Robert Carey over at DC Comics. Next up, we move over to Dynamite Entertainment with Thundercats number 5, written and drawn by Stephen Mooney. Declan Shelby, who's been writing the previous issues, he worked on the plot with the story as well, but the main writer and the artist on this was Stephen Mooney. So let me just say this first. I was not sold on Thundercats with the first issue. It has slowly come along since then. I really like the writing in this story. It is easily my favorite. It focuses on the relationship between Lionel as he gets trained by Chitara, and you see in this story, she is really the one that is trying to guide him the most. I will use the word gentle in the most gentle way by really kicking his ass. She takes him out to spar with him, to train him to fight. But in doing so, she is also really trying to advise the young king, trying to get him to realize he is more than who he actually feel that he is. And the whole issue is about this. It's her sparring, but also teaching. She's not only teaching him about himself, but she's also teaching him about those that are around him. At this point, Lionel is grown, but he's still a cub at heart. And we see that still with how Chitara refers to him at the beginning of the issue. She still calls him Cub. But as she spars and trains him, she also talks to him and gets him to see how the other Thundercats truly are. You know, how Pantro, who is just this cutthroat warrior, is really trying to help Thanos and is really trying to help Lionel in his own way. But Lionel struggles with this because of his own insecurities. And he tells him how to look more at Tigra and how Tigra's silence isn't him trying to push the young king away or turn the young king away. He's basically saying he's waiting for you to come to him. And so she is allowing Lionel to open his eyes and to see things differently. Not just from the aspect of who she is, who Pantro is, who Tigra is, but also who Wily Cat and Kit are as well. And even though Lionel is closest to them, being that before the ship made its way to Third Earth, he and the Kits, you know, he and the Wallies were the same age. She shows him a different way of looking at them, especially now that he has to lead this team. And by the end of the story, you see that these two will probably be the closest of the Thundercats. Now, I think that what Mooney is also doing is he is setting up this miniseries that is to come, that is focusing strictly on Chitara. And if that's the case, I'm still all for it. It was a very good story that showed really how wise Chitara really is and how important she could be to Lionel's growth as Lord of the Thundercats. Now, I remember when I was a kid, at some point I was thinking that Lionel and Chitara were going to hook up as a couple, since at that point they were around the same age. And in some points in this issue, you could look at them and wonder if that would be the case as well. But I don't know if I want that now in my older years, for there to be anything other than the role that you saw Chitara play in this issue play out with regards to her and Lionel. You know, her being a strong advisor to him and allowing him to see things differently and grow as Lord of the Thundercats, especially now that the Eye of Thundera is gone and, you know, Calica took off with that and they have to get it back. So, great issue. Like I said, the series was slowly coming on to me. This one really sold it. I really appreciate what Stephen Mooney did with this from a writing standpoint. The art was hit and miss for me. There were some pages where things just looked off, and there were some pages that were downright beautiful. And I don't know if that had to do with the fact that he was tackling both duties. And if that be the case, I would be really torn as to whether or not I would want him doing it from that aspect again. I would probably want him doing the writing more than the drawing. Because again, it was just off and on. Some stuff really was good. Some stuff was not that great. Not bad. There were no terrible pages, no terrible panels, but there were just some where Lionel, Chitara, Calica, whoever, just looked off. And, I don't know if that was by design or if that was due to being rushed for the issue, but it just felt off. But the story itself, the writing for the story itself was superb. Really liked it. And it has me waiting, not only for issue number 6, but also for the Chitara, the Chitara miniseries that Sue Lee is going to be writing, that's supposed to be out in July. So that is Thundercats number 5, written and drawn by Stephen Mooney, with plotting from Declan Shelby over at Dynamite Entertainment. We now go over to the Ghost Machine universe with Geiger number 3, written by Jeff Johns, art by Gary Frank, and of course, wherever there's Gary Frank, there's colors by Brad Anderson. So, what we see in this issue is the trio of Tariq and Bonnie, and we see Nate, the last member, I believe, of the Nuclear Knights. But we see them continue to travel to find this individual that Nate said used to be a glowing man as well, but has since been healed. And so they are now on a track to find this individual. But there's a lot going on here. First of all, the best way I can say it, there are some points in this story where I just want Nate dead, killed. And I know the role he plays in this story, and that's okay. But it's just, there are some parts of the story where he just feels like a blunt idiot, and I just kill him already. But it's a good story as we see the three go and they make their way into this town that has been plagued by this thief who has been attacking the town and stealing. And Nate brings Tariq to this town because apparently this glowing man lived there. And he goes to the sheriff to say, hey, I'm trying to find information about this guy. Can you help me? And the sheriff basically bargains with him to say, hey, I will give you this info if you take care of this guy that's been basically harassing my people, and take him out because we can't deal with it anymore. And you really want to do this because if not, hey, my town has a problem with the Nuclear Knights, and I can easily turn you and your friend over and let you all be taken care of. So Tariq, he hesitantly agrees to do this, but that's not really the most important part of this story. There is a strong message in looking at this where Tariq is reading this book, and there are several instances where either Nate or something happens and this book gets destroyed. And there are several points where you may wonder whether or not Geiger is about to really lose it and kill the old knight, but he holds back. But the last time this happens, the knight kind of feels what Geiger is going through, so he leaves and he goes and searches for a library, and he finds the book that Tyreek had been reading. And it just goes, the whole point was basically to show how important books are just in life and how it can take a person away from the problems that ails them. And in the end, Nate kind of feels the same because he found a book that his mom used to read to him, and he now feels what Tyreek is going through. But there are a few other things that's going on. So by the time this issue ends, Barney has been kidnapped. You know, he actually goes out when Nate leaves to go find the library and to get the books. But the guy, and I don't know who this guy is, that's been chasing down Tyreek, he takes Barney and attempts to use him as bait to get Tyreek. But there's a small story in there where we see how Barney lost his parents, or his mother at least. And it really shows the connection between him and Geiger. But the other important part, and it's going to lead into issue 4, is we see a backstory involving Junkyard Joe. And by the time we get to the last page, we know that Junkyard Joe is going to return in the next issue. So I read that miniseries with Junkyard Joe, loved it. So I can't wait to see how they incorporate that version of Junkyard Joe into the Ghost Machine universe, and to see how things play out. Really good story. Again, when Jeff Johns is on, he's really on. You know, there's nothing that Gary Frank can't do from an artistic standpoint. Just a good story. I am eager to see how this whole universe within Ghost Machine play out as they develop it. But again, this was a real good story. Can't wait for issue 4 to come out. But again, that is Geiger number 3, written by Jeff Johns, with art by Gary Frank, over at Ghost Machine Image Comics. And finally, so I am going to do this. You all know me when it comes to Batman stuff. I leave it for the Batman universe. But considering the events in this story, particularly this issue, I had to include it in this episode because it is my book of the week. It might be my book of the year for this one incident as well. And again, I'm being kind of crazy when I say this. But that is Batman and Robin number 10, written by Joshua Williamson, with art by Simone DeMeo and Nicola Cismiglia over at DC Comics. So, let me be clear. If you listen to the latest episode of the TBU Comic Podcast, I was screaming back and forth that this was a 5. And for me, it is a 5. Is this issue the perfect issue? No, it is not. There is one thing that makes this perfect for me, and that is the return of Maya Dukat. For the longest, I have been a fan of hers back from the old Robin Son of Batman miniseries that Tomasi and Gleason did. And for the longest, Joshua Williamson said that she would make her return. And at some point, I kind of lost hope in that happening, particularly with the development of Flatline during the Robin series. But when this issue came out and I was reading it with regards to preparing for the TBU recording, and I get to that last page where not only Goliath returns, which was wonderful on its own, just seeing Goliath back on a comic book page, but to see him holding this device that shows the hologram of Maya talking to Damian, my first response was, thank you. Because if there was ever a one true relationship that people always talk about with these shipping episodes and panels and threads, if there was ever a one true relationship for me outside of the obvious Bruce and Selena, it's Damian and Maya. Now, back during the original run, of course, Damian was 10, Maya was 14, 15. Damian's now 14. If age is being kept true, that would put Maya around 17. Yeah, these two would be the relationship that these two had in that miniseries was only held back due to the age difference. I do not believe that age difference is there anymore. And if it's not, this would be the one true relationship if I ever believed in that stuff. Now, the other stuff that went on, it was basically a conclusion of everything that went on with the Shush storyline. We see that they had their final battle with Man-Bat. They were able to win the battle with Man-Bat by basically using the same pellets that had the bats turn on Batman in the first issue of this series. And basically they used it on Man-Bat. The bats attacked him, but by attacking him, the bats basically turned him back into Kurt Langstrom. Comic science. I'll just leave it at that. So Kirk is now back in his human form. He was able to save all of the other bats that were poisoned with the serum that he made, that he was attempting to turn everybody else into bats, as he's always done as Man-Bat. But good story. Again, it wasn't perfect, but what was perfect for me was the return of Goliath, and specifically the return of Maya Ducard. So we will see what will happen next, particularly knowing what Maya was doing for Damian. And that was searching to see whether or not it was actually true that Bane was dead. And we see from her report that he's not. He is on Dinosaur Island, and he is alive and well, however well is defined. But it's going to be pedal to the metal as Damian goes out to find the man that killed Alfred back during Tom King's run. And I would imagine all hell is going to break loose as Bruce and Damian go after him. Art-wise, I'm going to say this. Art-wise, I would prefer if Nicola Shizmila remained the main artist. I've said it many times on TBU that Simone DeMayo's best work is when he does covers. I don't think he is great for interiors. Sometimes the art style just seems a little too muted for me, and I don't know if it has to do with the colors or not. But I would prefer to see him stick to the covers instead of the interiors. Other than that, I absolutely love this series. I absolutely love this issue, again, specifically because it finally returned Maya to the universe. So I'm excited to see what goes on. I would be A-okay if there was a Flatline Maya Damian love battle to go on and Maya somehow wins. But we will see how that all plays out. But again, my book of the week, absolutely loved it. Batman and Robin number 10 from Joshua Williamson, Simone DeMeo, and Nicola Zejmila over at DC Comics. And that is it. Ooh, boy, 10 titles covered this week. But that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Next week, we're going to be looking at not as many titles. We're going to be looking at Ultimate Spider-Man number 6 from Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto. We're going to be looking at Wonder Woman number 10 from Tom King and Daniel Sampere. We're going to be looking at Sensational She-Hulk number 9 from Rainbow Rowell and Andres Genolet. And just know I am quite pissed knowing that this is the penultimate issue and Marvel has canceled the series after issue 10. Rainbow announced that on her Twitter feed a few weeks ago, I believe. But I am not happy about that at all. We're going to be looking at Destro number 1 from Dan Waters and Andre Bresson. And finally, we're going to look at Gun Honey Collision Course number 2 from Charles Ardai and Ang Ho King over at Titan Books. So, not going to have as many books as we had this week, but still some good stuff on tap, and I'm looking forward to discussing those with you. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at the BatmanUniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.